Well, in Luke 12, the chapter we have been studying, Jesus offers a lot of what we call these days life hacks. Anybody ever heard of a life hack before? Pete, thank you. All right. Emily's got it. Well, there are all sorts of different hacks. There are things like food hacks, there are car maintenance hacks, there are lawn care hacks for any of you that want to get your grass looking nice and green and lush this season. And these hacks might sound a little scary to some, but they are actually very beneficial tips and lessons. A hack is actually a techie term that refers to a way we can do something or use something in a creative, effective, and efficient way to simplify and enhance the task we are trying to complete. For example, there are thousands of hacks that we can find online for how to get our computers and tablets and smartphones to be running and operating as smoothly and efficiently as possible. There are hacks to help preserve the battery life on our phones, as well as hacks to keep our laptops free and clear of all viruses and malicious spyware. It seems that if we have any sort of problem these days, we can just go to the Google machine there and type in our problem, and as if by magic, the solution, the answer will just pop up in the form of a new and innovative hack. A new way to do something, to get something done. But the life hacks Jesus offers in Luke 12 go much deeper than solving our posting problems on social media or how to keep weeds out of our gardens. No, Jesus' hacks are, as you would expect, dealing with much more profound and pressing concerns. A few weeks ago, we heard Jesus talking about how to live a life of integrity, where our public persona matches our private beliefs, commitments, and actions. And last week, we heard Jesus talking about how to provide a life hack where we can live richly towards God rather than only living to be rich. And in Luke 12, 22 through 31, Jesus tells us that our lives will be far better and much more joyful and rewarding if we can just stop doing one little thing. Bobby McFerrin sang about it. What's that one little thing we need to stop doing? Worry. Worry. Don't worry, be happy. If only it were as simple as Bobby McFerrin's song makes it sound. Don't worry, be happy. If only it were as easy as Jesus says it can be if we just trust in God and God's provisions for our lives. But it's not that easy, is it? All of us worry about something in our lives. I don't think I have ever met anyone, maybe you have, and if you have, I would love to meet them, but I have never personally met anybody who is completely worry-free. Each of us, I believe, lives with varying degrees of worry, wouldn't you say? I have known some folks who have long-term worries about things like how they are going to fund retirement, pay for their children's college education, or care for a sick family or relative. But day to day, their worries are few and far between. They have the things they need: food, water, shelter. On the other hand, I have also known people who nearly have their PhD in worry. They seem to worry about everything from what outfit they are going to wear that day, to whether they have enough peanut butter in the house to last them the rest of the week, to what the weather is going to be like, to whether the house is clean enough, to the fact that there are far too many rainbow marshmallows in their Lucky Charms cereal and not nearly enough horseshoes. Now, I hear they're now just selling the bags of those marshmallows from the cereal. So hopefully that maybe could check off one of those problems. You know, if you're getting far too many rainbows, now you can balance it out with your horseshoes. But do you know anyone like that who has their PhD in worrying? Would you maybe put yourself in that category? I think I would categorize myself as a weekend worrier. Not a weekend warrior, that's a little different, but a weekend worrier. And what I mean by that is that I don't often get too caught up in the smaller day-to-day worries, especially when my schedule keeps my mind and my body focused and busy. But when there is a little break in the action, however, like on a weekend, and my body gets to relax and my mind gets a chance to wander and wonder about present realities and future possibilities, I have been known, again, we're in confession, we're talking about confession these weeks, I have been known to put that worry cycle into motion. You know the one I'm talking about. The one that begins with that gnawing feeling in the pit of your stomach that sends a message to your brain that something is wrong, but you just can't put your finger on it yet. That's how it begins. Then comes the anxious phase where, well, everything seems to be a reason for concern since we just can't quite place why you're feeling worried in the first place. Then comes pre-panic mode. And in pre-panic mode, you finally decide what you're most concerned about, but then we have no idea how we are going to ease this worry. This, of course, is followed by full panic mode, right? When you feel like the world is completely crumbling around you and that the only relief will come when you finally resolve your most pressing concern. And the cycle of worry finally comes to somewhat of a completion, I think, when you get to what I call the slap in the face stage, where another big, important life moment finally puts your worry into context and often reveals just how small and seemingly insignificant it is in the grand scheme of things. Have you ever experienced this cycle of worry? How many of you would say you are in one or more of the phases of this cycle right now? How many of you have ever felt trapped in this cycle at some point in your life? I'll admit I have felt trapped in the cycle of worry for a long time when it comes to concerns I have about both the short and long-term financial security for both myself and my family. There are times when I move from anxious to pre-panic to full panic to a slap in the face all in the same week. But sadly, my worries about this do not disappear or get wiped away when I get that slap in the face. Instead, the worry creeps back in shortly after as that gnawing feeling in the pit of my stomach once again. I hate being trapped in the cycle of worry, and I bet you do too if you have ever had that experience. It can leave you feeling powerless and defeated. But Jesus' life hack today provides a great alternative. to living in a constant state of anxiety and offers us a way out of the worry cycle so that we can put our focus where it truly ought to be, on living for God and striving to establish God's kingdom of love and peace on earth as it is in heaven. You see, Jesus warns us that we cannot fully commit our lives to God if we are constantly distracted by our worries. That's truth, isn't it? Instead, Jesus says to trust in God and God's provision for our lives. And it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But it actually takes an enormous amount of faith and dedication and discipline to develop a level of trust in God that will calm our anxieties, fears, and worries, so that they will not command the constant attention of our hearts, minds, and yes, our souls. And I think this is really important. At no time does Jesus say that if we trust in God, all of our worries will vanish into thin air. It's not in there, folks. Jesus doesn't say it. There is no back-to-school-like coupon we can redeem with God to get 100% off all our worries. Right? It just doesn't work like that. What Jesus wants us to remember, however, is that we have a much better chance of enjoying and appreciating our life if we place our worries in God's care rather than our own. As Jesus says, we cannot add a single moment to our lives by worry. So why do it? My mother always said to my sister and I growing up that we should save our worries for the things that are worth worrying about. Do you ever get that advice? Save your worries for the things that are worth worrying about. And just random thoughts. I mean, I can remember, throwing temper tantrum about a candy bar or something like that, and, how I wasn't being treated fairly, and that was my mother's response, Save your worries for something that's worth worrying about. And I think there's great wisdom in that saying. And of course, I didn't understand it until I was much older. And there are certainly things worth worrying about in this world, like whether there's enough healthy and nutritious food for people to eat and clean water for everyone to drink, whether we can live in peace without the threat of violence and terror, whether we can afford to keep a roof over our heads. I think these are things worth worrying about. The good news Jesus proclaims is that God will provide for all of these things and more, both for us and through us, so that all people can live rich and abundant lives, physically and spiritually. So how do we begin to trust God and place our worries in God's care? How do we begin? I think you know what I'm going to say at this point, because I say it all the time. But it's worth repeating again this morning. It starts with prayer. God knows what we need, and God knows what is most pressing on our minds and hearts. So bringing those things to God in prayer does more for us than it does for God. Prayer makes us pause and name our anxieties and fears before God. And that in itself can be the disruption we need to break out of that cycle of worry. And once we are out of that cycle, we can see more clearly a way to move forward. You see, when we're trapped in the cycle, it becomes like that tunnel vision, right? You can only see one way out, and if you're not getting there, you don't see any other options. But once you're out of that cycle, all of a sudden our perspective changes and we can see 360 around us again. We can see the alternatives. We can see a way forward. But in the case of my worries about the short and long-term financial security for myself and my family, I have begun to pray more intentionally about that over the past few months. Now, don't get me wrong. I still have concerns and worries in this area. But through prayer, God has led me to see that my fears will never be relieved in this area unless I begin to actively plan for my financial future, not tomorrow, but today. That realization finally led Emily and I to make an appointment with a financial planner. And we have begun taking those small steps necessary to bring about a more stable financial future for our family. It doesn't mean that all the worries and concerns have been wiped away. But you know what? Taking that first step feels really good. And it feels much better than being trapped in that cycle of worry. It also feels good to answer Christ's call to serve the world in a way that helps relieve the worries of others in real and meaningful ways. One of those ways is by feeding people who have a real and constant worry about when and where they will get their next meal. We know that far too many people, especially children around the globe, hundreds of millions in fact, go to bed hungry each night, even though God has provided more than enough food to feed every man, woman, and child on the planet. We can help relieve the worries about hunger for thousands of hungry children by volunteering just a few hours every year to pack meals at Feed My Starving Children. A group from our church is volunteering this Friday, August 19th, at the Feed My Starving Children in Eagan from 6 to 7:30 p.m. It is not quite 2 hours of your time. But in that time, nearly 30 to 40 children will be able to receive a hot, healthy meal for an entire year. If you're interested, there's more information about how to sign up and be a volunteer at Feed My Starving Children in your bulletin this morning. Or Bobby Joe is right there in the back, and she'd be happy to sign you up. And if you cannot physically pack meals at Feed My Starving Children, you can also make a difference by donating money to pay for the food that is packed. For every contribution makes a significant difference in solving the worry and anxiety that hunger brings to millions of children around the world each day. But whatever your worries are today, I challenge you to start bringing them to God in prayer. Then ask God to help break you out of the cycle of worry and find a way to move forward, to do the work of building God's kingdom here on earth. And trust that through it all, God will provide for the things that you need so that you can help relieve the needs of others. Thanks be to God for this amazing gift of grace.